I have a bit of a riddle. It's not complicated, real simple. What is something that everybody wants? Nobody minds receiving it. But not everybody always gives it. What is something that, to word it just slightly different, what is something that we all want, we never mind receiving it, but we don't always give? You know, you can't always know what someone likes or dislikes, especially so until you get to know them. You know, you're having somebody over for dinner and you're featuring spinach casserole. You don't know if the people, if you don't know them, if they love spinach or they hate spinach. Now, growing up, I absolutely did not care for spinach. I like it now. Angela has had a very good effect on me. But you can't always know. And if you look out into a crowd of people that you do not know, just, faces of people you do not know, you don't know what their individual likes and dislikes are in this area, that area, whatever. Yet, at the same time, there are certain things common that are commonly liked or disliked by all. For instance, everybody likes to be treated well. I have not yet met a person who says, I don't like to be treated well, treat me bad. I have never run into anybody like that. Everyone likes to be treated well. No one likes to be mistreated. That is across the board. And I'm sure we've all heard the expression, the milk of human kindness. Everyone wants to be treated with respect. So if you like a title, the subject is simply treating with respect. That's what I'm talking about today, treating with respect. Now, when you talk about respect and you go to the dictionary or you Google it, Webster's, the word respect, it says high esteem, courteous, or considerate treatment. So, high esteem, courteous, considerate treatment. So let's take those three things and just incorporate them in this kind of a statement. Let's say, esteemed enough to be shown courteous and considerate treatment. Esteemed enough to be shown courteous and considerate treatment. That is based on what we call the Golden Rule. We could even say that is synonymous with the Golden Rule. And in the discourse, the message, the sermon that Christ gave, not to the multitude, but that he gave to his disciples in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. The three chapters that have the most condensed and yet broad and thorough layout of what it really means to be a Christian. Matthew 5, 6, and 7. In Matthew 7 and verse 12. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, how you would like them to deal with you, how you would like them to treat you, then use that, as a standard for how you treat them. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them. Treat them as you would like to be treated. That's the golden rule, we call it. Now, man's golden rule, natural golden rule is he who has the gold makes the rules. That's the carnal golden rule. Who has the gold makes the rules. And we see that in this world all the time. Christ's golden rule is how you would like to be treated. Well, that's how you should treat others. And to show the significance of that it's not just a platitude, he says, for this is the law and the prophets. That runs as a heart and core center thread through all of the law and the prophets. So it's pretty important. Now, sometimes the absence of it teaches us the value of it. You ever seen that in life, how the absence of something sometimes, And the effects of that absence sometimes is what teaches us the value of it. The old saying that you don't miss the water in the well till the well goes dry. I grew up seeing two people treating others with respect because there have been too many cases of them not being treated with respect. I grew up seeing two people treating others with respect because they hadn't been. Dad grew up poor. He was the hardest working man that I ever knew in my lifetime, but he grew up poor. His growing up years were very poor. And we talk about how that the memories that you have in your childhood growing up, especially those first 20 years of life, are so deep and embedded and impacting that you carry those memories with you the remainder of your life. But one of the things he remembered from his childhood when he was a small boy was not being allowed to stand by the coal-burning stove in the classroom in the wintertime because they were too poor to contribute to the coal supply. See, in those years, when my dad was a child, he was born in 1926, when he was a child, and you had a lot of the one-room schoolhouses, and they had this in the only source of heat was this stove with this pot-bellied stove that burned coal or wood, but in this case, coal. And so those kids whose fathers could afford to contribute to the coal purchase, those kids were given the preference to stand up close to the fire, to the stove. And the ones who couldn't afford it, their fathers couldn't, they had to stand on the outer ring. Now, some of you had the wonderful experience of being in a house where the only heat was from the fireplace, no other heat on a cold winter day, and you stand near the fire, in the front of you, when it gets hot enough, you turn around because the backside is cold, and then it gets hot, and then some smart aleck grabs your pants leg and yanks it up, the heat against your skin. But the heat is not felt out very far. And it might not seem like a big deal, but yet at the same time, where there is a difference made, and the difference is felt, and it affects kids, and it affects people. And that was one of the memories that Dad had of his school years. Also, when Dad was little, there was a time when he couldn't talk real plain, and he was made fun of. I remember an incident my very first week in school. I think it was the very first day in school. My very first week for sure, and maybe the very first day in school, there was a boy in the class who would be referred to today as mentally challenged. He was very seriously mentally challenged. And the 9 years through elementary and middle, and including the first year of high school, because the school system was set in a way that the school I started in went through 9 years, and when we finished the 9th grade, graduated from the 9th grade, we went on to the high school that was composed strictly of the 10th and 11th and 12th grades, another 30 minutes away. And this kid was just simply passed on. He didn't pass, he was just moved on each year to the next class. Very mentally challenged. And some of the other boys picked on him and made fun of him. Have you ever noticed kids can be cruel? I don't know if you've ever seen the autobiographical type movie, Coat of Many Colors, about Dolly Parton, based on real life events when she was a little girl. And she was so excited because her mother made her this beautiful coat of many colors from these various pieces of cloth. And she was so excited, and she couldn't wait to get to school and the other kids to see what a wonderful, beautiful coat she had and what her mother had done for her. And some of the kids laughed her to scorn, made fun of her, and just crushed her. Kids can be cruel. I didn't join in. That late afternoon, when I was home from school, and when Dad got home, he took his shotgun for a little rabbit hunting, just to stroll down through the fields and the woods, and he let me trail along. And I very clearly remember us stopping and sitting on a stump, and with Dad and me telling him about that incident at school, and Dad telling me that he was happy with me. He was proud of me. He was happy with me for not joining in and to never join in to something like that. You know, I said as I grew up seeing two people treating others with respect because they hadn't been. My mother was the oldest of 5 siblings. She grew up with a mentally ill mother. And Mom had to start taking on major responsibilities at age 9, even pulling a stool up to the counter to stand on to be able to reach things. She grew up with a number of people and their children looking down on her and mistreating. You know, statements like, well, you better not go down there. There's a crazy woman that lives down there. You better not go down there. There was one incident that occurred when Mom was a kid, and they had moved into town for a short while, and 5 kids came over to run her off, run them off. All I'll say is that she put them on the run. She was 5'2". Of course, she wasn't at that point. She hadn't gotten all of her growth, but she was quite a dynamo. You know, sometimes, in fact, many times, again, it takes being mistreated to truly realize and appreciate how valuable a thing it is to be treated right. I started school when I was 5 years old, straight into the 1st grade. There was no such thing as kindergarten or Head Start. In northeast Mississippi, in those hills and hollows, if you'd have mentioned Head Start or kindergarten, people looked at you, what are you talking about? There was no such thing. And on top of that, that was the last year that the old system was used, and they switched to the current system the next year. But that first year when I started, school started in the summertime, so that you could get in so much school by harvest time, and then you had this long extended break for, picking cotton and bringing in the crops, et cetera, and then school picked back up. So I went into the 1st grade literally at age 5.5. That was my age. And I was also small for my age. And I went through the first 9 years of school as one of the smallest kids in my class. School and life has never had a shortage of bullies. And one of the things that we have zero tolerance for, and that we make sure that all the kids know at our camps, we will not tolerate any bullying. We will not tolerate any verbal bullying. We will not tolerate any physical bullying. We simply will not tolerate any bullying. And our teens know that no matter what they may have to deal with in their school system, when they go to camp, they don't have to worry about being bullied. Anyway, life has never had a shortage of bullies. And they always look for what they consider to be the easy marks, the easy targets. A bully wants to hurt, but they don't want to be hurt. Easy marks, easy targets. Well, obviously that always includes the smallest kids. I could hold my own. I could hold my ground, at least with some, and I did, though it was never a pleasant experience. But some were simply too much bigger, too much older, too much stronger. And I just had to take it, suck it up, endure it. Didn't have a choice. But you know what? It sure gave me an early appreciation for the value and importance of treating with respect. It certainly impressed upon me from an early age on the need to treat with respect. Respect would prevent, you think about it, so many problems. It would eliminate so many because so many problems simply would never occur to begin with. They wouldn't get off the ground. They wouldn't occur. And that's extremely important because, have you ever noticed that a problematic life is not fun? We're going to have enough problems in life as it is, without self-generating additional ones. Here's something else about life. Life is a relationship matter. Think about that. Life is, how do you get away from relationships? And why would you want to get away from relationships? Life itself is first and foremost a relationship matter with God the Father and Jesus Christ. And it's a matter of us humans with each other. Whether it be friendship, whether it be marriage, parents, children, But life is a relationship matter. We constantly must relate to others, and the quality and enjoyment of our life will relate heavily to the quality and condition of our relationships. And there are things that make them work, and there are things that destroy them. Why do so many marriages fail? We live in a time where with every passing year, the rate of marriages failing goes higher. Why do so many marriages fail? Why does love? I can't live without her. I can't live without him. I've got to have her. I want her for my life partner, for the rest of my life. I want him for my life partner for the rest of my life. But then I can't stand to look at him. I can't stand to look at her. I don't like her looks. I don't like her voice, as one man told me one time. Why does love and romance fade so many times? Well, because one reason is because respect quits being shown by one or the other, sometimes by both. But because respect quits being shown by one or the other, or maybe both, you and I we set our sights on the kingdom of God. We set our sights on his righteousness. We set our sights on being like God in Christ. We're supposed to set our sights that way. And we focus on that word that is the most comprehensive definition of God that can be, L-O-V-E, love. And love is so much more than just emotion. It's so much more than just emotional attachment. What agape means encompasses such a tremendous range and depth. And one of the main ingredients in agape is respect. It is an ingredient of agape, and it's that particular ingredient that promotes and safeguards and protects relationships. And it is such a true statement to say that no relationship is safe without it. No relationship is safe without respect. It's an unusual commodity. And it's only respect if it's exercised. Again, it doesn't really exist if it's not used. You know, why do families usually have so much trouble? Well, families don't live at a distance with each other, do they? They don't live at arm's length and arm's length and arm's length. Families live close. And because they live close, they're able to see both the fine points that each has, that we have, but also the faults. Because when you live that close and you really get to know the other person or the family member, etc., you're living close enough to see both the faults and the fine points. And that puts a responsibility on us, yes, to appreciate the fine points and be thankful for them, and to responsibly deal with the faults, to properly process that in our feelings and our emotions and all. But they can begin to take each other for granted. They can begin to not really appreciate each other, and following suit, not showing respect. Think about it. Taking for granted, failing to feel or show appreciation, that is the opposite of respect. And again, respect is the basis of any lasting relationship. Whenever I counsel a couple of people, it can be young people or it can be older people, it can be their second time around, third time around, whatever. But the point is, anytime I'm involved in premarital counseling with a couple planning to get married and I'm counseling with them, one of the things I really emphasize is that respect is the basis of their relationship. There's a saying, and you've heard it, familiarity breeds contempt. You know who said that? Benjamin Franklin. Wise old bird. Because you do see each other's faults, and you've got to learn to live with love and respect in the face of that too. But now, Benjamin Franklin's statement, that wasn't the complete statement. The complete statement was, familiarity breeds contempt and kids. No, familiarity may breed contempt. There's a certain truth to that, just based on human nature. But respect safeguards and preserves. And you know, you can't draw close unless you get close, can you? And respect serves as a safeguard. Well, if you're going to talk about respect and dealing with respect, where does respect come from? Where does it start? Where does it come from? Where does it start? Respect comes from, or it comes out of a mind that holds a certain perspective in view. And if that perspective in view is not in your head and your thinking, well, you know, respect is not going to be operational. But respect comes out of a mind that holds a certain perspective in view. And entailed in that view is that any individual is worthy of basic respect. Now, what I mean by that is I'm very familiar with the statement that you can't demand respect. Hey, you got to respect me. And that's the way some people deal with it. You got to respect me. No, I don't. You can't demand it. You command it by your fruits, by your actions. But even if somebody does not command your respect by their actions and who they are, what they do, you still can show them respect. There's a difference. You cannot mistreat them. And from the mindset that any individual is worthy of me exercising respect towards them, not going to mistreat them, and also the view that, okay, this is not their day of calling. Maybe they're quite a scoundrel, but I'm called. They're not. They shall be in due time, either before this age is out or in that 8th day later on, but that everyone is made in the similitude of God with the potential to become God. And it's a seeing of the potential worth of the person. Potential worth and value, not just the face value. Have you ever heard somebody be dismissive by saying, he's just a kid. He's just a kid. Have you ever seen somebody written off, pushed aside, ignored, and it made okay in their own eyes by their statement of, well, he's just a kid? Like, well, that absolves you from having to treat with respect. I have witnessed over the years and at different times and different places, I have witnessed 3 or 4 men standing around, maybe kind of in somewhat of a circle, talking. And with these 3 or 4 men standing there in the circle, maybe a 12-year-old. I was 12 once. Maybe 14, maybe 15, maybe 16. And another man come up to those men. Hey, Joe, how you doing? Shakes his hand, and Bill, good to see you, and shakes his hand. Just goes around, completely skips over, completely ignores the young man standing there. Do you think the 12-year-old or the 14-year-old doesn't know that he's not even esteemed highly enough to be shown courteous treatment? He's a non-entity. He's met with total indifference. You think he doesn't notice that? Or, and society does this. He's just an old man. He's just an old man. He's about finished his time anyway. His days are about over. You don't have to pay any attention to him. He's of no real concern. He's just an old man. See, we have these elements in society, and we see we see basic respect and people living with respect going down, down, down. We got so many people today that don't even have self-respect, let alone respect somebody else. And how can you expect people who don't even have self-respect to even consider respecting anybody else? So, what do we see? Do we just see, just a kid? Just a kid? Or just an old man? He's just an old man, worn out, got one foot in the grave. If he's not careful, steps on a banana peeling, the other foot's going in. That's all. I resent and I resist allowing osmosis with society to take place, to absorb their approaches and their attitudes. I want to think like God, not like them. So what do we see? Just a kid or young man or an old man about worn out? Or do we see like what's predicted and promised in Daniel 12:3? Daniel 12 and verse 3. In verse 3, Daniel 12, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. The potential to someday shine like the sun in its glory, to just be brilliant with energy, like a flame of fire, like the stars, like the sun. In Psalm 37 and verse 25, Psalm 37 and verse 25, a young man, a kid, an old one, about worn out, David, King David, verse 25, I have been young and now am old. Eliab, the firstborn, the eldest, and David, the youngest. Several brothers in between, and sisters. Quite a span of years between the oldest and the youngest, the kid. The kid brother, the kid. David, what in the world are you doing down here, you snotty-nosed, naughty boy? Who'd you leave those few sheep with up there in the wilderness? I know you, I know your pride. You're down here to see the battle. You're down here. And you know, David just made a statement and turned away. He didn't even try to convince his brother of anything. His brother totally disrespected him. And you know what? You get the feeling that that wasn't anything new. You get the feeling that they didn't have much of a relationship. You get the feeling that there wasn't really any respect on Eliab's part towards David. That's the feeling you get. He's just a kid. Don't have to pay any attention to him. Get back with the sheep, David. I have been young. And he dealt with, disrespect when he was young. Now, that's just one case we know of. And he says, now am old. David was lying there in bed with so many covers on him, he could hardly turn over because the circulation was so bad he couldn't even get warm. He was an old, worn-out man. He died at age 70. And his last weeks, months, year, doesn't really tell us on that aspect. His circulation was so bad he couldn't generate body heat and stay warm. Can you imagine? a grandson or a great-grandson coming in to see him, lying there in bed, all covered up, and a friend comes in with the grandson, and the grandson spends a few minutes with his grandfather or great-grandfather, and when they leave, and the grandson's friend says, that King David, that's the one who killed a lion and a bear and saved his sheep, and that's the one who killed the giant Goliath, who was 9'9"? That weak, old, worn-out man who can't even stay warm, that's the mighty David? It's really amazing how we're affected in terms of who we show respect to and who we don't. You know, for the old man, the one who's about worn out, who's in Christ, he's on the edge of eternity. Because when he dies, the next instant of his consciousness, he's hearing a trumpet, and he's rising to meet the returning Christ. And it's why God can say there in Psalm 116, verse 15, precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints, sealed and set for delivery. See, respect has to do with how you treat others. And how you treat them starts with our thinking. How we think of them starts with how we see them. Here's an important point, and this is very important. The responsibility of how you treat them doesn't hinge upon whether you like them or not. Well, I like so-and-so, so I will treat them, I'll treat them right. But now so-and-so, I don't like them, and I am not going to treat them right. Let me tell you something. And again, I think you know me well enough after 4 years, and some of you knew me for almost a decade before I came back. I'll be blunt, and I'll be straightforward, and I'll call a spade a spade. And I'll also be very candid, and I'll be very open, and I will share. We have national leaders that do not demand respect. We have national leaders that I cannot respect because I will not respect corruption. I will not respect those who are trying to tear down the nation. I will not respect those who are not respect worthy. But if I were in their presence, I would not mistreat them. I would treat them with respect as far as the way I would treat them. It would be Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so. It would be, whatever their title is. I would treat them with respect, not because they're worthy of it, not because they've earned it, because that's what I'm supposed to do. And you can treat those who are not worthy of respect in a respectful way. That's to the benefit of my character, my being like God. With that said, look at Matthew 5 and verse 44. Again, in what is the most condensed and yet thorough layout of our Christian calling. Matthew 5 and verse 44. Christ said, "But I say to you," and again, this is to the disciples. Jesus, I want to be one of your disciples. I am one of your disciples. Thank you. And thank you, Father, for allowing me to be one of the disciples of Jesus Christ. And I want to remain a disciple. And I want to grow as a disciple. But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Love your enemies. Doesn't say you have to marry them. Doesn't say you have to go fishing with them. Doesn't say you have to say, let's go down here and get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and spend a couple of hours together. Doesn't say you got to hang out with them. But don't mistreat them. Don't do back to them what they do to you. Oh, you did that to me, I'm going to do that back to you. No, don't mistreat them. Why? Why is that so important? Why is it so important to have that kind of operation, that kind of approach? Well, look at verse 45. Here's the why. In order that you may be the children of your Father which is in heaven. It makes you like God. It makes you like Christ. It's part of having their mind, their mindset, their view. For he makes his sun to rise on the evil and on the good. Both the evil and the good benefit from his sun, from the sunshine, from photosynthesis, from all of that. And sends rain on the just and on the unjust. They both benefit from what God does. Again, it makes you like his mind. See, respect in the mind for others translates into and produces a certain approach even in general. And it comes to affect all of our dealings with others. Now, it starts in the mind, and that's where it's rooted. Mind and heart, you could say. But it flows out in action, and respect is simply an appreciation for and consideration of another person's feelings and welfare. And it takes him into account. Again, I find the statement of Peter in 1 Peter 2:19. I find the statement of Peter a great statement to live by. And I'll read the whole thing first. 1 Peter 2:17. Honor all. Now, again, men is in italics, and it'd just be best to leave it out for that matter because it's not in the original. Honor all, then that is totally inclusive. Love the brotherhood, fear God, honor the king. But notice that first part, honor all. It's just a good way to live. Respect is all inclusive. You don't have to like someone to treat them right, do you? Where is the requirement that if you like somebody, then you have to treat them properly, but if you don't like them, well, you don't have to treat them. And we're not talking about the whole issues of crime and punishment. We're not talking about the whole issues of trying to stop evil. We're not talking about other issues. We're talking about how we function as part of our lifestyle. And certainly things are not going to our liking if someone is despitefully using us. Well, you're despitefully using me. Now I'm going to try to get in a position where you cannot despitefully use me, and then as soon as I can find opportunity, I'm going to despitefully use you. See, that's totally carnal. But it's not carnal to try to get yourself in a position where you can't be despitefully used. But it is carnal if you then look for opportunity to try to despitefully use them. Obviously, things are not going to our liking if they're despitefully using us. But again, we don't have to turn around and mistreat them. Now, like all of God's ways, and by the way, you know why we're here? We're here because we want to take on God's ways. We want to become like God. And it's interesting that God's ways don't exactly always match up with human ways. They don't always match up with what I want to do. But if I want to have God's ways bad enough, I will push my ways aside with His help. Like all of God's ways, it doesn't start with the other fellow. Well, I'll tell you what. When he shows me some respect, I'll show him some. Again, that's the natural carnal way. He does well by me, I'll do well by him. He doesn't show me respect, I'm not going to show him any respect. It doesn't start with the other fellow, what he's willing to do. Guess what? It starts with me. That's where it starts. Have you ever noticed that the new covenant is very personal? It's your personal covenant with God, and with the new covenant, it doesn't start with the other guy. If you're in the new covenant, you're in Jesus Christ, what's upon you to do, what's upon me to do, doesn't start with the other person. It starts with me. Christ, when I entered into the new covenant with Christ, all of a sudden, the dynamics changed. Christ is looking at me and, Rick, what are you doing? It starts with you. It starts with you. It starts with us. It starts with each of us. That is part of the beauty and responsibility of the new covenant. And let me give you a marker of conversion. People sometimes say, well, am I converted or not? Well, I can't always answer that, obviously. But am I deeply converted? Well, taking these things personally, that it starts with me. It's not the other guy. It starts with me. Taking these things personally, that it starts with me, is one of the trademarks. It's one of the trademarks. It's one of the fruits. It's one of the proofs of conversion. See, I realize Christ is not talking about the other guy. When I read these things, well, that's for somebody else. I hope they're listening. No, it's for me. It's laying out my responsibility. And think about if each and every one of us in the new covenant were to take it personally and start from that point ourselves, what a difference it would make in all the affairs that we have to be involved in. You know, here's another truism. We don't always have a say in how others treat us, do we? We don't always have a say, but we certainly have a say in how we treat them. We have a say in how we treat them. You know, you can't carry a relationship with an enemy. Don't try. You can't. You can't carry a relationship. That takes both. A relationship is conditional. It takes both. But you can determine that I will not mistreat them, that I will treat them proper. And sometimes people say, well, how do I get respect? Well, one of the best ways is just simply to give it. And it is a matter of give versus get, so it comes down to where we put the focus. Again, respect, like so many of God's truths, it's folks, let me throw something else in. We talk about the milk of the Word. We talk about can't handle strong meat. You know what strong meat is? It's learning how to live the hard things, the things that go against human nature, that go against carnality. It's the tough things is learning how to truly operate in a way that we don't give in to our human nature, and we actually incorporate the ways of God. And like respect, like many of God's truths, again, it's simple to understand. It's how we view and treat others. But the challenge is actually doing it. And it starts with an attitude of seeing the other person's worth or value, whether that is currently being tapped in by God through calling or is going to be tapped into at a future time. Philippians 2 and verse 3. Philippians 2. And verse 3. To show respect is simply to treat with worth. You're treating the person as having worth. It says here in Philippians 2:3, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory. Me, 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 me. My, 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 my. You know, there's even a song about that. And it's a catchy song and all, and it makes the point. And you could learn a lot from some of these country western songs. There's a lot of sermonettes put to music. But anyway, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, just talking about, you know, a humble frame of mind. Let each esteem other better than themselves. Esteeming others better. And, you know, okay, that's a goal, that's a direction. And that's a tough call to try to esteem others better than yourself, but at least if you're pointed in that direction and striving for it, then you're going to pretty well be treating them like you need to be treating them. You know, in the old days, a lot of little towns and city streets weren't paved. They were dirt or clay or caliche or whatever it might be. But the custom of the man walking on the street side and the woman walking on the inside next to the buildings on those sidewalks along those streets was done with purpose. And it was based in the fact that, again, number one, the man took the more dangerous side. You know, Exodus 3 was the most dangerous side. The safer side was the inside. And he was acting as a protector, but he was also acting as a shield. Because if there was a mud hole or something, and I know A model, T model, or cars later in the 30s and the 40s, even the 50s, a lot of places, if they drove by and hit a mud hole and splashed it, he would catch at least most of the splash. And it was a very simple form of him esteeming her better to try to spare her, both on the safety side of things and also on the dirty, muddy side, wet side of things. The man is walking through an apartment complex. There's landscaping going on. And they've got the sidewalks poured, and there's a lot of sod being put in, there's a lot of work going on, and you're walking along with a jacket and a tie on the sidewalk, and you turn the corner, and here comes a laborer struggling with a full wheelbarrow full of sod, dirt, and okay, there he is, there you are. Hey, you peon, you low-life, dirty laborer. Can't you see I've got a jacket and a tie on? We can't pass on this sidewalk. It's not wide enough. Push your wheelbarrow off into the soft dirt. Now, you may have to struggle to get it back up on the sidewalk, but you know, that's not my problem. That's yours. You think I'm going to back up or that I'm going to step off? And it might even be a little bit muddy there. You think I'm going to step off and let you by? Who's really important here? Think that doesn't happen or can happen? That happened to me one time in an apartment complex where I lived, and they were doing some work down in South Texas. I turned the corner, and there's a guy pushing a heavy wheelbarrow. I smiled at him, stepped off, and he gave me the biggest grin and went on. You call that a simple little thing, but it's a reflection of showing respect, treating with respect. And don't tell me that there are not men who would not back up or step off, but would force him, because I've met men like that. I've met people like that. You know, these things are not platitudes. They're a way of life. They are a way of life. Verse 4, look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. In other words, don't be concerned only with your own welfare. I mean, that's okay to be concerned with your welfare, but not to the exclusion of others' welfare. Appreciating. You know, when I was single, I could park my car wherever I wanted to park my car, as long as I parked it to where when I got out on my side, there was no mud hole I was stepping in, or, water puddle in the parking lot, or broken pavement. As long as I parked in a way that, okay, get out on my side, it's fine. But when I married, I had to begin to take into account Angela. And so when I would park the vehicle, it wasn't just good enough that I parked to where, well, honey, I'm sorry, there's no mud hole on my side. Just step in the mud hole. I mean, it's not very deep, and you can take your shoes off, put on dry ones when we get in the house, etc. No, you have to start thinking of someone else. And you start altering what you're doing based on consideration for them. And the time that I drove the safest and easiest, it has to be the singular greatest time of driving so easy, is when Angela had just given me the most beautiful little daughter in the world, and it was time to take her and that new little daughter from Baptist Hospital there in Montgomery, Alabama, help her and the little baby girl into the car, pull out onto the South Loop, go about 2 blocks and turn into the apartment complex, which was just across the way from where she was born. I have never driven so easy because, guys, I think we all realize we've not gone through it and we don't know the exact feeling, but when ladies have babies, they're sore and they need a lot of consideration and all of that. And when we got into the little townhouse we lived in, our bedroom was upstairs, so I even picked her up and carried her up the steps so she wouldn't have to climb the steps. It's interesting. It's interesting the various and many ways that we have, in little ways, not just big ways, looking for love in all the little places, all the little things, looking for respect in the little things too. And when you treat with respect, when you show respect, you're acknowledging one's worth as made in the similitude of God with the potential to become God someday. As I close, I have a couple of questions. First question. How many of you, now if your hand goes up, you're not listening. How many of you in this room picked your siblings? Your blood siblings, your brothers and your sisters. See, there's no such thing as a human being picking their blood siblings. Their, mom and dad, this is what I want, that's what I want, and that's what I want. In other words, we didn't pick our physical siblings, did we? I didn't. I love all three of mine, and we're close, and I'm thankful for them. I didn't pick them, but God just very much blessed my three brothers and me as a group of siblings. But you know what God says? Love each other. Respect each other. Learn how to have a wonderful relationship together. Okay, that's the first question. And I knew the answer. Before I asked the question, it's rhetorical. And rhetorical just to focus our minds on something. Okay, second question. Which ones of you in here picked your spiritual siblings? No hand should go up. Because, see, you had nothing to say. I had nothing to say about who my spiritual siblings are. God Almighty, the Father, is the one who picked my spiritual siblings. He's the one that picks each and every one of us and makes us a family. No, we don't choose our physical siblings, and we don't choose our spiritual siblings, the ecclesia. They're chosen for us by God. I have quite a few more notes, but I'm not going to go into them. I've been up here long enough, and I've said enough, but I will close with this. I am very, very, very thankful for Rome, for Gadsden, and for Chattanooga, and for the families and the relationships and the respect that I see in these three congregations.